Thank you. I've helped many institutions solve complex assessment and student learning problems and collaborated with institutions all over the world, but mostly in the U.S., the Middle East, North Africa, and the Caribbean. Today's agenda, we're going to focus primarily on discussing kind of changing environments in assessment and accreditation and how TK20 has helped support institutions as they improve their assessment efforts. If we kind of look a little bit at what we heard this morning of how important education is, and we believe that education is important, then we also need to believe the importance of assessing education and gathering evidence and showing through education that we're making continuous improvements within our educational institutions. And that's what really TK20 is about. It's really gathering that evidence at various levels and making that available to different departments, different administrators, to allow that use so that we can make continuous changes. Today, if we look at the changing environment within assessment and accreditation, the outside organizations are becoming more and more rigorous in looking at assessment and accreditation. The accrediting bodies, the funding agencies, the different ministries of education are taking a much more active role in overseeing the successes and the quality that all of our institutions have. And they are putting more pressure on all of our institutions to gather more evidence and show the successes we are having. In some cases, various organizations are impacting our organizations by putting sanctions on them or cutting funding or putting organizations on probation or restricting them based on the standards they have and the proof or the evidence that we can show in the success that we have in what evidence that we can show in improvements within our programs and our institutions. Many of the organizations all over the world, and this still holds true also in the US as well as Europe and in the Middle East, are still gathering information using manual processes. Much of this is disaggregated through assessment environments that many of our programs, many of our colleges that are gathering data are not speaking to each other on how they're gathering data. They are collecting data haphazardly. The data is gathered in many cases on spreadsheets, and there's no real systematic process for the data being collected. And not only is there not a systematic process for collecting the data, but the data, once it is collected, if it is collected, is not being analyzed in any way so that administrators or deans that are viewing the data can make determinations on how to make improvements to the programs or to the institutions. So it's a multifold problem of not only collecting the information, but then making determinations of what to do once the information is being collected. So part of this is looking at this and making assessments once information can be collected in an efficient and optimized way. As I mentioned before, much of the information is collected in silos, and then trying to report on this is very difficult in an optimized fashion. So if we look at TK20, how can TK20 be a supporter for institutions in looking at this kind of environment? TK20 is a comprehensive tool set that allows institutions to support strategic and assessment planning across the institution. It supports institutional effectiveness and quality assurance by collecting evidence, whether it's student-based evidence or other evidence, to evaluate improvements within different programs, within different departments, as well as the institution, and linking them to overall institutional goals. Once it's been collected, it allows for sophisticated reporting at various levels so that the administration can utilize that data in the way that they need to make improvements within the institution. The importance within the system is also integration. When I mentioned before about data being captured in silos, data can be used in planning purposes, data can be used for experiential learning, for clinical learning, for internships, for different partnerships. We can use data through integrations with demand. You're able to look at different quality improvements that you have within your system. One of the questions that most institutions often ask is, how do I begin? Is it right for me? I have a small organization or I have a large organization, where do I start? It really doesn't matter whether you have a large or small organization. Starting anywhere in looking at quality improvement is an important factor. Just collecting data systematically, using that data, starting with different programs and building from those programs is a critical factor in looking at how the data can be improved. In many institutions, just starting with one or two programs and building on those programs allows other programs to see the benefits that they can derive from looking at different improvement. And much of this can be done through very transparent mechanisms so that other programs can see how successes can be translated to other programs. Some of the mechanisms that are used are tying overall evidence to standards and objectives that are used within the system. I'm sure all the institutions that you represent have goals and objectives that are defined for every program. You also may have goals that are defined from your ministries of education or external accrediting bodies. All of this can be linked to the evidence that you have. There's also the ability to look at very specific processes for collecting data, whether it's data collection forms or direct or indirect evidence. In looking at the ways that data can be collected, not every program will collect data the same way. You need processes for collecting data in a variety of ways and allowing those to be linked together, and the flexibility to allow those to be collected so that different faculty, different programs, different departments can use data differently to look at quality assurance in the way that those programs need to view their data. Data needs to be looked at in different course environments and to constantly be reviewed and assessed and analyzed And once that's done, to be reviewed again and make changes based on the data that's being collected. Data needs to be tied together with existing systems that you have. Many of you already have learning management systems, be it Blackboard or D2L. And we need to leverage those existing systems so that students and faculty don't have to replicate the way that they're already utilizing data, and take that data and use that as part of your quality assessment program, because that becomes valuable evidence in the way that students and faculty are already using and viewing data. It's one thing to collect the data, but all of you know it's only one part of it if you can't run reports and analyze the reports. So data needs to be viewed from faculty perspectives to determine what improvements can be made from a student perspective. If students have internships or clinical experiences, how data can be used to improve those processes. Many times your students are getting their degrees so they can be employed. It's a very important aspect to survey your employers, if at all possible, and understand how successful your students are in those areas. And that becomes a quality method that you can use in the process. And then to document this through an accreditation process. There's a variety of reports, both analytic reports as well as data reports, but looking at this from strategic goals from the institution, looking at planning cycles, all the way down to budget items, and looking at it from course goals, program goals, and unit goals, and dividing that up. Now, all of this may sound complicated because I'm trying to give you a big picture, but the important part is, again, starting somewhere, gathering some data, looking at some factors, and then breaking this down at whatever level is appropriate so that you can make some strides in making improvements within your institution. There's all types of reports by standards and goals, analytic reports, accreditation reports that you can submit back to the ministries of education based on the data you have. One of the success stories we have is working with Lebanese American University. Lebanese American University has multiple campuses in Lebanon. They actually are chartered in the state of New York, and they are accredited by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, but they're also licensed in Lebanon. So they have multiple groups that they have to submit reports to. They also have many specialized accredited programs. Programs for nursing, programs for engineering, programs for business. All of these require reports that they have to submit on a regular basis. And these are the same accrediting bodies that require more and more evidence to be submitted. They have an enrollment of about 8,000 students. The challenges that they had, probably very similar to challenges that you are facing. Their assessments were administered on a department-by-department basis, and there was no consistency from department to department. Everything was done manually. It was all extracted based on different tests, different ways that each department administered any type of collection of data. There was no or little analysis that was done on any kind of student assessment or quality assurance. It was inconsistent. There was no reliance on that data to make any decisions. It was all antecedent kinds of data. And as the accrediting bodies changed their standard and became more rigid, they were concerned that they would lose their accreditation. So what they did is they actually implemented TK20 across the entire university. Now, they didn't implement every program all at the same time. They implemented phases of it, but they did start collecting some evidence. And they leveraged faculty evaluations. They did leverage some elements associated with some clinical experience because they tied this back to their pharmaceutical program. That was their main focus to begin with. And the results allowed through collaboration of faculty, of students, and administrators allowed them to gather data to produce very specific reports for their program and to continue with their accreditation and make it very successful. Is the job complete? The answer is no. We're continuing to work with them to extend to other programs and to broaden it into other accreditations. So the story is not complete, but they're continuing to build on all of those efforts. We're very successful in the region, not because of the product. We're very successful because of our partnership with Nusij. Nusij brings us the local presence to allow us to deliver really support within the Middle East, within North Africa, to support all of your institutions. And together we collaborate with all of you to create a very customized set of software. We allow this to be sustainable in an ongoing basis through partnerships, through consulting, through really an assessment software that meets your specific needs to deliver the kinds of quality assurance that each of your institutions need for your particular needs, because every one of you are unique, your requirements are unique, and it has to be sustainable for your unique individual needs. So thank you for allowing me to talk a little bit about why we think assessment, accreditation, and quality assurance are important in the region. And now I believe we have discussions with the panel.